If there exists a hierarchy of broken destinies, my mother would sit upon its highest throne. My childhood effectively ended at the age of 2, marked by the first cries of my newborn brother, Mark. Back then I was merely a temperamental toddler, yet in my mother's eyes I was already a monster. Even though my grandparents later taught my heart the meaning of love and care for her, I remained an eternal demon. She cast me aside like yesterday's news, trading me in for the latest, greatest version of a child. Fast forward to age 13, and the world had become a cage. My mother now had 4 children, 2 from my father and 2 from my stepfather. It was the age of rebellion, a time when nothing made sense, and my stepfather's solution was to beat the defiance out of me. Every flash of individuality, every questioning thought was met with physical violence. The most agonizing part wasn't the pain itself, but the fact that she watched it happen and didn't care a bit. This was the spark, the moment the thirst for revenge took root. Though my mind was fractured by years of abuse and the literal weight of a bookcase that had collapsed on me at 11, I knew I had to be patient. I was too broken to act then, but I was strong enough to wait. My mother had just made her first mistake, and she didn't even know it. To add to the weight of our existence, my mother and stepfather had long ago abandoned any pretense of maintaining a home. They were spectators in their own lives, waiting for the weekends when my grandparents would leave to visit my great-grandmother. The moment the door closed behind them, the house became a labor camp, and we the children were forced to do the heavy work that should have fallen on adult shoulders. I understand the concept of chores, but what we endured was something far more sinister. By the age of 10, I wasn't just tidying a room. I was balanced precariously on ladders, clearing gutters from the roof, or swaying in the branches of tall trees with shears in my hand. At 11, I was performing tasks where a single slip meant a broken neck, all while the adults remained comfortably grounded. The timeline of my life is a blur of scars and labor, but the memory of my 14th year remains razor sharp. It was a day that started like any other. My mother had ordered Mark and me to watch Alicia, who was only 2. My stepfather was absorbed in his video games on our good days. He'd let us watch him play, though we were strictly forbidden from touching the controller without his watchful, oppressive eye. The silence was broken by a sudden, chilling realization. I stood up, the air leaving my lungs as I whispered, "Where is Alicia?" In an instant the house erupted into a frenzy of panic. Mark and I scrambled through the rooms, our hearts hammering against our ribs. My stepfather ran to wake my mother, who had been sleeping in with baby Sam. My father, who was visiting at the time, was in the kitchen. In the chaos, he burned his hand on the stove before joining the frantic search. Mark and I surged into the backyard, eyes darting everywhere, but we never even thought to look toward the pool lapse in judgment that would haunt me forever. We turned back to search the garage, but then a sound tore through the air that I can still hear today, my mother screaming at the top of her lungs. We rushed outside to find Alicia lying on the deck, her tiny body still and silent. My mother and stepfather were desperately trying to breathe life back into her, their hands moving in a frantic, hopeless rhythm of cry. My father grabbed Mark and me, dragging us back into the house as the sirens of the ambulance began to wail in the distance. Alicia never woke up. They pulled the plug that night, leaving a hole in the world where a little girl used to be. My mother's second mistake had been made, and this one was written in blood. Mark and I were hollowed out shells of the boys we used to be. Guilt is a heavy shroud for a teenager and a child to wear, and we draped it over our shoulders as if it belonged there. My grandparents pleaded with us, their voices trembling as they tried to convince us that this blood was not on our hands, that a child should never have been responsible for a child. A week later, the clockwork of the state began to turn. Child Protective Services arrived, and my father, fueled by a sudden spark of wisdom, launched a custody battle. He argued the truth that should have been obvious to everyone. My mother was a danger to her own flesh and blood. He won briefly. But my grandparents, blinded by a misplaced sense of family loyalty, fought to return us to her. In the end, the system failed us once more, and she won us back. Fast forward. I am 18, adult, standing on the precipice of high school graduation, eager to finally carve my name into a world that had so far only given me scars. Mark was 15 now, a boy growing into a man, but a fight had left him with a broken finger held together by pins and surgical screws. He was prescribed heavy painkillers, bottled lightning that required a mother's vigilance to manage. It was her duty to guard him, to regulate the medicine that kept the pain at bay. She failed. I I remember my grandfather picking me up from school that day. His face was a mask of gloom, a map of tragedies he cowled and he put into words. As we pulled up to the house, the world slowed down. I saw the paramedics, I saw the stretcher, and I saw a black body bag that held what was left of my brother. Mark was gone at 15, an overdose born from the same neglect that had claimed Alicia. That was the final straw. The bridge didn't just burn, it evaporated. My family fractured into two warring camps. My mother retreated to my grandparents, while I stood firmly by my father's side. His argument was a jagged blade of truth. If she had been a mother instead of a ghost in her own home, Mark would still be breathing. The aftermath was a whirlwind of ruin. The state finally saw her for what she was. Sam, my youngest brother, was snatched away by and swallowed by the foster care system. My mother was legally stripped of her right to ever raise a child again. I never saw Sam again. In the blink of an eye, I became an only child in a graveyard of memories. She had destroyed the life I knew with her cold indifference. Now it was my turn. I would ruin the rest of her life in every way I could imagine. The time for mourning was over. The time for revenge had begun. This woman carried the deaths of two of my siblings like ghosts in her wake, and because of her, my only living brother was severed from my life forever. She didn't just raise me, she dismantled me. She eroded my mind with psychological warfare, bruised my spirit with emotional neglect, and scarred my body with physical violence. She stole the very concept of a childhood from me, leaving only a hollow void where memories of joy should have lived. Now, whenever my eyes fall upon her, I do not see a mother. I see the architect of my ruin. I feel a fire igniting in my chest, a slow burning, unmitigated rage that seethes beneath my skin. It is a fury that no apology could ever dampen and no passage of time could ever extinguish. The debt she owes is written in the lips of the fallen and the silence of the lost, and I have decided that it is time for her to pay. Part 4. The Architect of Agony. My grandfather was more than a guardian, he was my anchor, my mentor, and my closest friend. He poured his soul into teaching me the skills I would need to survive, yet he possessed a fatal flaw, a kindness so profound it bordered on naivety. My mother, like a predator sensing a wound, fed on that kindness, exploiting his mercy long after the graves of my siblings had settled. My grandmother, hollowed out by grief, had simply surrendered, drifting silently in the wake of my grandfather's decisions. I decided that her easy manipulation of them would end with me. Every time she reached for something, a favor, a resource, a piece of their sympathy, I stood in her path. I challenged her openly, forcing her to fight for every inch of ground in front of our grandparents. I lost those battles more often than not, but that wasn't the point. I wanted to be the grit in her gears. I wanted to see her fray at the edges. I provoked her, hoping for a strike, a blow, a single physical transgression that I could use to destroy her. She never gave me that satisfaction, but she broke. I watched her dissolve into tears of frustration time and again, and I felt nothing but cold triumph. Then fate handed me a gift. A slip at work left her with herniated discs and a spine that was little more than a map of chronic pain. When the news reached me, I didn't offer sympathy. I grinned. By this time, my stepfather had been hauled off to prison for doctor shopping, and my mother was desperate for a divorce. When she returned from the hospital, broken and fragile, the real game began. I became a ghost in the house. I would take her painkillers, those precious anchors of hers, and hide them in the dark corners of the home or simply flush them away. I wanted her to feel the unadulterated weight of her agony. I wanted her nerves to scream just as mine had for years. And they did. She suffered in a silence that I had meticulously crafted for her. The climax of this chapter came with the screech of tires and twisted metal. She crashed her car, and when the police arrived, they found her system flooded with the very meds she was so desperate to find. A due charge followed, and she was sentenced to 6 months behind bars. When I heard the cell door had finally clicked shut behind her, I didn't just smile, I laughed. She was trapped, she was in pain, and she was alone. It was the perfect stage for what was to come next. My planning had only just begun. The throne of thorns. Time passed, as it always does, but it brought no mercy, only new opportunities for retribution. By the time my mother was released from jail, I had already begun my reign over the household. I was a college student now, having finally traded a year of aimless waiting for the sanctuary of academia. My grandparents, ever the pillars of misplaced kindness, offered me a deal. As long as I worked and studied, their roof would be mine free of charge. It was a deal I accepted with a predator's grin. While she had been rotting in a cell, I had meticulously erased her presence from the house. I packed her life into boxes and banished them to storage, claiming her bedroom as my own. My old quarters I transformed into a sanctuary for my own leisure, a gaming room where I could find peace. When she finally walked through the door, she found herself a guest in a home that no longer had a place for her. She was relegated to the living room couch. Every morning I watched her with cold fascination. I saw the way her face contorted as she struggled to stand, her spine protesting after a night spent with metal bars pressing into her already ruined back. It was a slow, agonizing revenge, delivered in increments of discomfort. I savored every wince, every groan, knowing that her nights were as restless as my childhood had been. Part 6: The Poison Well. Eventually, we moved back to the old house, the stage where so many of our family's tragedies had played out. My mother, through a relentless cycle of poor choices and self-destruction, had worsened her condition to the point of desperation. She had managed to manipulate my grandparents into a dangerous game. She would find the dealers, and they would provide the coin for her illegal habit. I fought them. I warned them that this path led only to a prison cell for all of them. My grandfather, weary and logical, agreed with me, but my grandmother was still a prisoner to her own guilt. She cowed until he stopped taking care of her little girl, and she shamed my grandfather into submission. I refused to be an accomplice to their downfall. I reached out to the shadows, placing an anonymous tip with local law enforcement, hoping the law would do what I could not. But the gears of justice turned slowly, and that time my attempt at a final blow fell short. The tip went nowhere, but I did not stop. I continued my childish yet effective psychological warfare, hiding her medications, watching her frantic searches, letting her wonder if she was losing her mind or if the universe itself was turning against her. It was petty, yes, but sometimes you must descend to the level of the child you once were to make the monster understand the pain they caused. I didn't know then that I was about to deliver the ultimate screw you. It was a hidden pill, or police report it was coming in the form of the most malicious, vindictive statement I had ever spoken. The true reckoning was still to come. The final reckoning, a debt paid in full. I am 31 now. 13 agonizing years have crawled by since the day Mark's light was extinguished, and for every one of those years I have carried the blueprint of my revenge. My grandfather passed away last year, leaving a void that can never be filled. I have spent my adulthood building a fortress for myself, saving every cent from years of labor and inheritances from the losses we endured. I became a man of means while my mother remained a scavenger of souls. I went to visit my grandmother recently. She is a shadow of her former self, drifting in grief since my grandfather's death and the loss of her loyal dog shortly after. As we sat there, the weight of the past hanging heavy in the air, my mother walked into the room with the same unearned entitlement she had wielded my entire life. She asked if I would take care of her once my grandmother was gone. She called it my duty as her son. She was destitute. She had bled her inheritance dry through her illicit dealings and reckless waste. She knew the rest of the family estate was coming to me, and she expected to be saved. I stood up. I locked my eyes onto hers, pouring every ounce of the hatred, the trauma, and the cold, unmitigated rage I had harbored since I was a child into a single stare. "You get nothing from me," I said, my voice as cold as a grave. "Grandma is moving into a retirement home, and I am moving across the country. You destroyed my life. You stole my childhood. You are the architect of my siblings' deaths. You have broken the law and made everyone's existence a living hell. You will end up on the streets. You will die alone, and I will be somewhere far away, laughing. I never loved you, and I never will. You will never see your grandchildren. You are barred from my wedding, and you will never be a mother to me again. Rot in hell." The silence that followed was deafening. My grandmother sat in stunned shock, and for the first time I saw my mother truly break. She collapsed into a fit of tears, not the manipulative sobs of the past, but the sound of someone realizing the door to their salvation had been bolted shut from the other side. It was heavenly. After decades of being the victim of her neglect, I had finally delivered the ultimate blow. In 3 months I will help my grandmother move into her new home, ensuring there is no room for her little girl to weasel her way back into comfort. After that I am leaving. I am moving to a new state to begin a life that she can never touch, with a new career and a woman I love more than life itself. The debt is settled. The ghosts are quiet. And for the first time in 31 years, I am free. To those of you who have brothers and sisters, love them. Cherish them with everything you have. Be present in their lives, for you never truly know when the world might pull them away. My revenge was not born of malice for its own sake. It was born from the wreckage of losing the people I loved most in this world. Being an older brother was the most profound joy I have ever known. It was the happiest chapter of my life. When they were taken to the grave, and one to the cold machinery of the state, I was left to suffer the silence of being an only child. Even now, at 31, there are nights when the trauma resurfaces and I cry myself to sleep, mourning the life we should have had together. Please, I beg you, cherish your siblings. Thank you for reading my journey.